Okay, hello everybody. This is Dr. Willis, and we're going to be doing a Google Hangout here on Henrik Ibsen and introduction to tragedy. Let me go ahead and shut off my camera here because I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share. Let's see. This is what we're going to be taking a look at today. So. Um, we're talking about Henrik Ibsen's A Dollhouse and also tragedy as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this as a full screen share. This is a picture of Henrik Ibsen toward the end of his life and toward the end of his career. Quite the beard, of course. I'm glad that's not in fashion any longer. But who knows? Things come around. But let's, before we get too much into Ibsen's work, talk about tragedy. I've got a picture of the Parthenon in Athens, Greece, because it did originate in ancient Greece. And tragedy came before comedy in the Greek theater, and it began with a chorus of singers at religious festivals. During the springtime festival of Dionysus, singers would make up songs to entertain the crowd. Most of them were highly sexualized. The choruses were made up of entirely of men. It was kind of a spring fertility ritual in addition to um, a, um, a religious festival. Now, over the years, it developed into a competition between playwrights. And the three um, playwrights that we know best of are Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. Don't need to memorize those names or anything, but they were the most prominent. And unfortunately, even though they wrote probably over 250 plays, we only have a handful of them left, about 10 that have been recovered. Now, as the festival continued year after year, the playwrights tried to one up each other. So it went from a chorus of singers telling a story song to adding things like characters, music, costumes, additional actors. It started off with like one plus the chorus, and then they put two, and then added to a third, and so on. Okay, so let's talk about tragedy and what the point is, because theater is for entertainment. So why would we want to have something that's sad to entertain us? Now, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who was a pupil of Plato, and just as Plato was the pupil of Socrates, Aristotle wrote quite a bit about Greek theater, and he felt that tragedy could show the audience something very important, like the dangers of pride, incest, greed, indecision, corruption. All these issues are present in both Greek theater and, say, Shakespeare's work. Pride you see in Macbeth. Incest is an issue in Hamlet with his mother and uncle. Um, Greed, indecision on Hamlet's part, being a corrupt official or a corrupt king. Now, often the hero of a tragedy will have a tragic flaw that will influence the action. Now, what is a tragic flaw? This is something in a hero that makes him or her human, but it also, generally speaking, leads to their demise. For example, a famous tragic hero, Shakespeare's Hamlet, his indecision really becomes his tragic flaw because had he acted sooner, the play may have had a different outcome. In the case of Nora in A Dollhouse, her tragic flaw may be a number of things, but certainly caring for her husband and trying to do whatever she could to save him when he was ill um, becomes her tragic mistake in the play. Okay, so we're continuing on with tragedy and what's the point. According to Aristotle, a major benefit of tragedy is catharsis. You've probably heard this word before, but may never have had it defined for you. What is catharsis? It's the purging of negative emotions, primarily eleos and phobos in Greek. Eleos is pity, feeling sorry for others or feeling empathy for others, and phobos is fear. And we do this, have this in the modern world. We go to horror or thriller movies to be scared, to purge fear. We might go to a tragic love story type of film to feel sad because maybe we're feeling sad in our lives, or just to kind of feel better afterwards. So this is still present in modern day entertainment. Okay, so think about how tragedy does make you feel good afterwards. You know, seeing a movie like, say, Titanic that has a lot of sadness in it. Well, there's something about the love story that reaches a lot of people. So even though it's sad, it does make us feel good after we've seen the film. I'm trying to think of something a little bit nearer to modern day, but anytime you see a hero, say, sacrifice themselves for the greater good, is going to um, help us purge those negative emotions, at least according to Aristotle. Okay, so let's talk about Heinrich Ibsen, and that's how it's pronounced in Germanic languages. It's Heinrich rather than Henrik. He was a Norwegian playwright, and he's considered the father of modern drama. How so? Well, he challenged societal rules and government. He wrote plays that were critical of the society he lived in, which hadn't really been done before. And if you look at, say, Shakespeare, Shakespeare had to be sponsored by a lord, or in the case of his later career, by King James himself. So he really couldn't be critical of his current government. But Ibsen was very critical of the society that he grew up in. He created what's called the problem play, in which a societal problem was examined and scrutinized. If you were to write a problem play today, you might write it about the way that police officers treat minorities, or maybe the issue of the Confederate flag flying at state houses. Those are societal issues that might, in entertainment, have value if you take a close look at them or scrutinize them. Now, one thing that is interesting about Ibsen's biography is he did come of age at a time of great political change. He was 20 years old in 1848 when there were 7 or 8 revolutions in Europe, in Germany, in Italy, in Norway to a lesser extent, in Denmark, in France. So he came of age, really was becoming who he was as a person at a time of great political and social change. And he kind of kept that idea or that mode throughout his life. Okay, so let's look specifically at A Dollhouse. Some societal issues that are important to this play. First of all, women had no power. They had to get their husband's permission to do many things, including, as we see in the play, get a loan for money. But also they couldn't own property. If a woman had $1 million going into a marriage and a husband had $1,000, once they got married, the husband had 1 million plus $1,000 that he was in charge of in Norway and other countries. So men really ruled the roost in terms of the time that this play takes place in. There was also societal belief, and this becomes important especially with Dr. Rank, but also Torvald's views toward Nora's actions, that sins of the father or the mother would automatically be passed on to the children. Dr. Rank has, they call it consumption of the spine in the play, but what that really is syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease. Dr. Rank thinks he got it because his father screwed around too much when he was in the army, but in reality, you cannot get syphilis from your father necessarily, and Dr. Rank got it himself. But they believe that because a parent does something wrong, or a parent is a criminal, or a parent is bad with money, that will automatically be passed on to the children. Also, this concept of the angel in the house, which is why I have a statue of an angel on this slide. There was a book that came out in the early 19th century called The Angel in the House. And the basic idea in the Victorian European world in which this play takes place is the women had a responsibility to be the moral concrete of the household, that men were inherently going to do bad things, cheat on their wives, gamble, drink, go whoring, that sort of thing. And it was the woman's job to bring him back to his moral center. So there was an incredible kind of responsibility placed on women that was kind of unfair, to be honest. But this idea that a wife should be the pinnacle of purity for both her husband and for her children. So when Nora doesn't live up to that expectation, it causes a real problem for somebody like Torvald, who in a lot of ways is kind of representative of that society's views and norms. Okay, so let's continue on. It was a groundbreaking play. For one, realism, showing stuff as it actually is, life as it actually is. This was kind of a rare concept in Victorian Europe and in Norway when Ibsen was alive. Plays would kind of have over-the-top characters or unrealistic characters, whereas Ibsen's like, no, I want to show life as it is. Holds a mirror up to society. That's really what a problem play does, is it tries to expose something that the playwright thinks society isn't getting quite right and needs to fix. Like I said, if you were to do it in modern times, it might be something on police brutality. It might be something on, for the current times, the Confederate flag and state houses. It might be, say, gay rights issues, all sorts of things that a problem play can do, which is a play that holds a mirror up to society and say, this is a problem that we have. Let's take a close look at it and see what we can do to maybe fix it. Makes an uncomfortable statement about the society that Ibsen lived in. It was really thought of as preposterous that a woman like Nora would show such strength in the individualism in such a way that would turn her back on her family and her husband. Now, do note a note on the title. It may seem something small, but it is kind of a big deal. This is a tricky translation. It translates from the Norwegian into the English as a house for a doll. So the structure, or calling it the structure rather than a doll's possessive house, works better. So as we're looking at the start of the play, and maybe you've already read it by the time you've seen this PowerPoint, maybe you've not, but look for things that are going to be symbolic, especially in the background, say the time of year, the decorations, what symbolic importance those things have. Tragic flaw. What is Nora's tragic flaw? How does it affect the play? Character growth. Just like in fiction, we're looking for characters to learn and grow from the action that we're seeing in the play. An awakening or an epiphany. Nora changing her perspective on the world based on the events of the play. Societal issues, talking about how things are done in society and why that's important. And pity and fear being raised in the audience's emotions, trying to elicit catharsis, as Aristotle wrote about with tragedy. How is it trying to purge those negative emotions? Okay, so I would encourage you to take a look at the beginning of the play or the film version of it to see what comes up. Back to, let's see, the video. Here we go. So take a close look at the beginning of the play. Make sure that you read those stage directions so you can see what the characters are supposed to be like and what they're supposed to do. So if you have any questions about the play or tragedy and Ibsen's play in general, please let me know. And let's get our fingers dirty and get into the play.